Jean Barretta.
Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Do me a favor. Raise your hand if you recognize this painting. I thought so. One of the most famous paintings in the world, right? The Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. Raise your hand if you recognize this painting. Again, another famous painting, The Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, raise your hand if you recognize this one. Not as many, but that's why I wrote the book, because not a lot of people know about Leonardo da Vinci's inventions. Most people know him because he was one of the great painters. And that's why I decided to write a book called Neo-Leo, The Ageless Ideas of Leonardo da Vinci, and focus on that part of his life. There he is, the man of the hour, Leonardo da Vinci. Most consider this to be his self-portrait. Some debate about it, but I think it's widely accepted as his self-portrait. I like this one. This was done by Francesco Melzi. It's my favorite, so I wanted to show it to you. Here's my cat named Leo. Doesn't have anything to do with Leonardo, but he's a great painter and inventor. You're going to have to take my word for that. I visited the house where Leonardo da Vinci was born and spent the first years of his life. And there I am. They tell me that's the exact spot where he was born. That's what the tour guide said. So you have to decide whether to believe him or not. I don't know how they would know specifically, but that's the information I was given. So you may ask yourself, why do you love Leonardo da Vinci so much? When did all that begin, right? Well, it began when I was your age, because I had the greatest elementary school teacher you could imagine, and her name is Nella Storm. And she's watching us right now because we're going out over the internet. So I want you to do me a favor. At the count of 3, we're going to say, "Hi, Nella," okay? 1, 2, 3. Hi, Nella! And we're going to say hi to her husband, Bruce. 1, 2, 3. Hi, Bruce! Because they are the people that introduced me to Leonardo da Vinci and the period in which he worked and lived, called the Renaissance. And the great part about it is that we're still close friends today. There I am a couple of years ago with them, and I just want to say, I love you both. If it weren't for them, I probably wouldn't be here talking about Leonardo da Vinci. So, as we mentioned, he was a great painter, and there's a collection of his paintings. I just wanted to show you those to get that part over with so we could move on to the other part of his life, the inventing. But we're going to start a little further back, because once I decided to write a book about Leonardo da Vinci, his inventions and how we still use them today, I had to go back. We have to go back a couple years, because the best way to explain that is to start with a book I wrote before that called Now and Ben, The Modern Inventions of Benjamin Franklin. Now, I've done 3 books on inventors. I followed the Leonardo book with one on Thomas Edison's inventions. But as I was trying to figure out how to do take a different approach on books about inventors and how we still use their inventions, I had to go, it started when I was living in Philadelphia, and I would walk around my neighborhood, and occasionally people would say to me, "Hey, you see that over there? Ben Franklin invented that. And you see that over there? Ben Franklin helped to develop that and to begin this and that." And I started to think to myself, wow, this neighborhood I'm living in is pretty special. I know where all these things come from, and it made it that much more alive for me. And I thought to myself, maybe that's what I can do for you guys. I can write a book, make you aware where some of the things in your house or your school or your neighborhood come from, and make it that much more exciting for you. So, in a nutshell, I went to work and I did lots of research, and in December 2002, the reason I'm telling you this story is because it's a really great lesson in perseverance and sticking to something you really want to do. So watch this. Pay attention to this date, December 2002. I had my first version of the book, Now and Ben. It was called Poor Richard at the time. In real life, Ben Franklin used the name Poor Richard when he published a book called Poor Richard's Almanac, because he was also a very successful printer. My book was about his next-door neighbor named Poor Richard, which was fiction, made it up out of my head. And he wants to be an inventor really badly, only he invents the most ridiculous things you've ever seen. So there's some humor in there, and you still learn about Ben Franklin's real inventions. So I gave it to my agent, who's here today. Hi, Laurie. Say, hi, Laurie. That's the person that does all the business for you. They get you your jobs and take care of all the contracts and things. She handed it to about 20 or more different publishers, and they were all saying the same thing. And you know what that was? No, thank you. Oh, how about you? No, thank you. Not for us. No, thank you, no, thank you. Over and over and over. And I wasn't feeling like that. I wasn't giggling. I was thinking, nobody wants it. I did about a year's worth of work on the research and writing it and all of that, and nobody wanted it. Finally, I met one editor named Christy Ottaviano. Is she here? She wasn't feeling well last week. So Christy, I hope you feel better if you're watching. She said to me, oh, I like doing a book called, I like doing a book about Ben Franklin's inventions and how we still use them today. But not really crazy about the Poor Richard story, so I'm going to also have to say no thank you. But if you want to do another version of it, I'd be happy to take a look. Okay? So I have a decision to make. I can do one of two things. I can say, okay, well, nobody wants this. Maybe I should just take the cue and realize I'm not cut out to be a writer, put it aside, and go back to illustrating. Because before I did this book, I didn't mention, I was illustrating books for other authors. And so I was making a living with that. But maybe I should just go back to that and forget about the writing. Nobody seems to want this work. Or I could say to myself, you know, she did say if I try again, she'd be happy to take a look. Maybe I should give it another try. So let's take a vote. Raise your hand if you think I should say, all right, enough is enough. I'll put this aside, go back to work as an illustrator. Raise your hand. Don't look around. Make up your own mind here. Or should I have said, okay, I'll give it another try. Look, this is something I want to do badly enough to give it another shot. Okay, that's the spirit. That's what I decided to do. I went back to work, and in March 2003, I had another version of Poor Richard. I took out things I knew they didn't like, and I added some things, and we gave it back to the editor, and we'll take another vote here. What do you think she said? Did she say, wow, look at all this extra work you did. Thank you for putting the extra work in. Let's make this book. Or did she say, I know you did a little extra work on it, but still not happy with this, so I'm going to say no thank you. Well, she read through it, and she said, that's what I said. What? Nobody wanted it again. So now I have to decide again. After a couple days of feeling upset and dragging my feet around the house, I had to decide, all right, enough is enough. Okay, I get the point. I shouldn't be a writer. Should I do that? Should I take that route? Or should I say, all right, look, I'm not finished yet. I want this badly enough. I'm going to try again. I did. I went back to work, and then, where's my pointer? I did a very different version. This was called Ben and Benny. And it was all about a boy who loved Ben Franklin so much he even shaved his head and wore glasses like Ben Franklin. And this time I made a complete dummy. And I don't know why they call them dummies, but a dummy is basically, God bless you. Basically, it's, bless you again. And it has all the drawings in here, all the writing. Everything is here, basically. So we handed this in, and what do you think happened? Did she say, oh, this is almost a finished book. Come on, let's do it. Or did she say, I'm sorry to put it to this, sorry to put it like this, but we're not going to be able to accept it. She read it, and she said, what's so funny? What's so funny? All right, so I put it aside. I went back to work. May 2004, I had the ghost of Benjamin Franklin. I even spell the word ghost of Benjamin Franklin. This takes place in our world today, and Ben Franklin's ghost shows up, and he's pointing out all the different things in the neighborhood to the kids as they're running around, a ghost, a ghost, and he's saying, wait, come here, look, I invented that. And So we handed it in, and what do you think happened? Did she say, all right, this is a new direction, I like what you're doing here, let's make it? Or did she say, now this is way off? She read it, and she said, I don't know why you find it so funny. All right, so I decide, all right, it's time to change my strategy. I have to think back, what was the real reason for making this book? Why did I have a passion for wanting to tell this story? I wanted to talk about Ben Franklin's inventions and how they're part of the world today, just the same way I did with Leonardo. But maybe these other stories I'm telling are distracting from the real point of the book. Maybe I should just keep it simple, go direct. Ben Franklin's inventions, how we still use them today. Just cut it down the middle. Show Ben Franklin on this side of the page inventing things when he lived. Show our modern day world and how we use them. So I made up an entire dummy of that one. Put in all the extra work, and she read it, and what do you think? Did she say, oh, okay, well, this is the way to go. Let's just go more nonfiction and stick with that idea? Or did she say, yeah, Gene, I'm sorry, you're putting in all this work, but we're still not happy with it? Well, she read it, and she said, yes, she finally said yes, but I want you to notice something. Do you remember, raise your hand if you remember the date of the first one. Make sure you know the answer. Do you remember? December 2002. The date on this, December 2004. So that's 2 whole years of no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no thank you, no, over and over. So this was a good example of wanting something badly enough to go for it until you get it. And of course, that doesn't always turn out for the best, but you're never going to know for sure unless you give it your best shot. And there's also, as if you can see from there, all these little notes in here of things that still had to be fixed and changed, but it was still the first book as a writer for me. And so it became Now and Ben, as you see there. And here's what I'm talking about as far as having Ben Franklin on this side of the page, inventing or beginning things like this was the first illustration in a newspaper in the colonies at the time. And here we are on this side of the page, our modern day world, and how almost everything we read is illustrated today. All right, so I decided I'm going to use the same idea for Leonardo. So we have the background story of how I decided to structure the book, Neo-Leo, right? Him inventing things during his day on one side, and then our modern day world on the other. First, I needed a Leonardo character. So I started sketching all these different versions of Leonardo, things that looked closer to, oops, I went too far, sorry. Things that looked a lot closer to the way he ended up looking, some not so much, some completely silly. Can you imagine him with hair down to his knees like that? But sometimes you just have to free up your imagination and just play around. And then I had to decide on how he was going to be dressed. Here's lots of examples. Am I going to show him more formally dressed or make it look as though he's been in the studio all day working? I kind of came up with an in-between, and there I had my Leonardo. And there he is from the book taking notes because he basically, every inspiration he had came from observing life around him. So we had him. And you can even see a little trick I do. How many illustrators do we have in the audience, by the way? How many of you like to draw or color or paint? Excellent. Most of you. How many of you like to write? I'm with the right crowd. Look at you guys. So here's a little trick for you if you're illustrating a book. When you have a character, you like to have them look the same way in page 1 all the way through to the end of the book. So I will often make a little graph of their features and even their body size. So this way I know that his eyes are always going to be the same distance from the nose and the chin. And you can see how his head almost fits perfectly in a circle with a couple little changes here and there. And I make that as a guide for myself just to keep things consistent. Excuse me. So I had my character. And then I decided, I have a format for the book, but I don't want to do the exact same thing as I did with Now and Ben. Maybe there are some extra things I can throw in there that will help keep it fresh. And so I decided, just like with Now and Ben, I had on this side of the book our modern day, on this side of the book I had back when Leonardo was living. And at the titles, at the top of the book in Now and Ben, it says Now on this side and it says Ben on this side. But in Neo-Leo, it says Neo here and Leo here. I should mention, too, some of you may not be familiar with the meaning of the word Neo. It means basically new. So what I'm saying is Leo, which is short for Leonardo, and Neo, which means a new version of what Leonardo did, because you see the modern day versions of his inventions. Excuse me. But then I thought, I'm going to add something extra. Maybe over here in the bottom right corner, I'll show a little vignette in each spread of maybe that moment when he had that inspiration for the first time. An example would be, here he is watching birds fly, and this is a real, very scribbly, because I'm just brainstorming at this point. Here he is watching a bird fly and thinking to himself, why can't we do that? Why can't we go up in the sky and fly like the birds? And that's what started him sketching and brainstorming his own versions of flying machines, which we would see here, and then you finally see the more modern day versions of his flying machines, or what other people later developed as flying machines. So I went with that format. I also decided to add an element that's really fascinating to me. In Leonardo's lifetime, he wrote over 20,000 pages worth of notes, and they all had something in common. Do you know what that was? You know? Go ahead, shout it out. Very good. He used what's called mirror writing, which means everything was written backwards. Everything he wrote in his notes was backwards. And he calls it mirror writing because if you hold it up to a mirror, you can read it better. We don't know exactly why he did that. There are a couple theories. Some say it was so he could keep his ideas secret, so that other people wouldn't catch on to it. Some of his ideas were a little controversial at the time, and so he may have been afraid that he would get in trouble for some of his ideas. Things that wouldn't get people in trouble today sometimes could get you in trouble. Remember, I should also state, he was living about 500 or so years ago. Yes. But there's a practical theory, too. He was left-handed, and back then they didn't have neat pens and pencils to write with. They would write with a bird feather called a quill, and they would dip it in a bottle of ink and write with that. Now, he was left-handed, and you know how we all write from left to right? Think how messy that would be if you're writing left to right, and all these fingers could be getting into the words that you're writing. So maybe if you went backwards, that would also help keep it nice and clean and neat. So it could be a combination of both. We don't know for sure. But I decided I'm going to put backwards writing on some of his note pages so that you can have fun holding it up to the mirror and getting more information on his inventions. Here's an example, by the way. Here's the name Leonardo, the way he wrote it. That's his handwriting, Leonardo. And here's how it would look in his notes. Backwards. There's the forward, and there's the backward. Do you get the idea? So those two elements I added to the book to keep it fresh with the same format as Now and Ben. I also put many personal things in my books because I basically, I spend a lot of time by myself in my studio during the day and evening, and I find ways to entertain myself. So I put lots of inside jokes in my books, like maybe little symbols that might be funny to friends, little inside jokes. I think every member in my family has been in my book at least once, close friends, you name it. And I put at the back of, in the back of the book where they have your biography and they have your photo. Well, since my son was about 3 years old, I've put him in the picture with me, and my readers have been able to watch my son grow up. This isn't the first one. This is the one from Neo-Leo. You've got my son there as Leonardo, and he's painting a portrait of me. Here's the one we left out. You can probably guess why we left it out. It's a little scary, isn't it? But here he is, his first appearance in Now and Ben, and then Dear Dear, and Jack the Tripper, and Zulapalooza, Timeless Thomas, the book on Thomas Edison. And here's the new one that was mentioned earlier. This is from Lincoln and Kennedy, A Pair to Compare, and there he is as John F. Kennedy and me as Abraham Lincoln. I even puffed up his hair a little bit in Photoshop. And that's that book that's coming. Okay, so I'm going to eventually get to reading Neo Leo, but first I want to break down the process of what happens when you start illustrating a book. No matter what your style is, we generally all go through the same steps as we're doing an illustration. Once we have the words and we read through everything, we have our ideas, we start doing little thumbnail sketches, which are very rough. They could just be even, this big, and you start scribbling out the idea before you forget everything you want to do. And here's a case of that. I thought for the introduction page, I want to show Leonardo standing in Florence, a town in Italy, city in Italy, town, what would it be? I don't know, whatever the Italian version of it is. And he's observing, Leonardo's off to the side there. That's my very rough Leonardo. He's observing Florence here with a building and some windows. All these circles are people. And of course, I wouldn't expect you to recognize that, but in my head, I know that these are all people. These lines here, that's where the words are going to go. And I get that down, and I do the whole book like that, so I have a sense of what the whole book will look like and how, I don't want to use too many close-ups, too many far-away shots, all that. So I like to mix it up and see what I have all in front of me before I start making neater drawings. Then, from this, I go to the next step, which is a neater, oops, change. Oh, no wonder I hit the pointer. There's a much neater version of it, right? And you can definitely tell a lot more about what's going on here. You've got people in the town. You've got Leonardo taking notes. You've even got a rough version of what the words are going to be at this point. Even then, I will still make changes. I will send this in to my editor or art director, and they will either give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Sometimes I might have to change things along the way. In a case like this, I just decided on my own to make a change, and I decided to put Leonardo standing up, and that's the image you saw of him earlier. Here he is, observing the town, looking out here at Florence. And here's the little, well, I'll wait to tell you my other inside joke before I give you this next final step. There's one final step before I hand this in to the publisher. What's missing here? Words, something else. Color, right. So I have to add the color. I've got the sketch. The color is wide open. You can use anything you can imagine to color images. Crayons, paints, markers, colored pencils, anything, chalk. I like to use watercolor. So I took this image, I put it on watercolor paper, and I finished it up with the color. Ta-da! And there it is, ready to go into the book. Now here's the inside joke in this one. Every person in this image is a character from one of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings. Cool, huh? There's Mona Lisa eating a bowl of spaghetti in the window. And woman with an ermine, there's part of the Last Supper. And St. Anne with child, and John the Baptist, and everybody in there is a character from the book. Okay, and so I hand it in just like this. What else would you see there, though, once the book is, before it goes into the, yes, young man? Right, words. Now, I don't actually put the words in. We have somebody at the publishing house called a designer, and we have two designers here, April and Anna, who work when we say, "Hi, April, hi, Anna." And April worked on this book, and they like to decide on things like what the style of the letters will be and an overall sense of design for the book. And once they get their hands on it, then we add the words, and there they are there, ready to go into the book. Now that you've had a little behind the scenes of what it took to make the book, what do you say we read it together? And once we read it, then we're going to have time for questions. So please keep questions in your head, things you might want to ask after we finish reading the book, okay? Let me take a little sip of water here. Excuse me. Look. Ah. By the way, here's a little doll of Leonardo they gave me. Here's Pepe the King Prawn. Do you guys like the Muppets? Yes. This is a character that my brother performed, so I wanted to bring my brother up on stage with me. So here's Pepe the King Prawn. Hi, Billy.